Hey, it's Ryan with this week's Mille Lacs Fishing Report. It's early September and water temps are in the mid 70s still. As you can see, the weather is still beautiful behind me, and it's been like that for a very long time out here, but things are about to change here shortly. I'm noticing a cool down that's going to start taking effect this coming weekend, and I'm expecting to start seeing some fall pattern stuff happening here real shortly. It hasn't happened yet, but I'd say by Saturday we're definitely going to see a change. Getting started with the muskie bite really hasn't changed, and I don't expect to see any changes until we see this cool down coming this weekend. If you're going to go out, what I would recommend doing for the guys casting is to cast bucktails and burn them fast. Now you can use smaller or larger bucktails for this, but I think the real key is to move them fast and try to provoke a reaction out of the fish. As far as colors go, I generally just go with darker colors on darker days and brighter colors on brighter days. But like I said, I would stick with that until we see this initial cool down this weekend. It looks like Saturday it's supposed to dip down substantially. And when we get to that point, I would then start looking towards the shallower water. I would still run the same baits. I would stick with the bucktails, but I might go in shallower. Instead of doing the 10 to 14 foot deep weed lines, I might start looking in 3 to 6 feet of water, poking around that area and seeing if any fish are sliding up into the sand. As far as guys trolling, not a whole lot's going to change there for quite some time. Even with this cool down, I don't expect to see very many changes until we get later in the fall. What most guys are doing right now is they're trolling about 4 to 6 miles an hour, and they're out on the flats. Stick to the edges of the flats, points on flats, anything different that you see on the flats. But the real key to doing it is trying to find large concentrations of bait fish, especially tulipy. Wherever you're marking tulipy out on the flats this time of year, there's sure to be some muskies around. As far as baits go for trolling, stick to the larger baits, 10-inch baits. You can pick tulipy colors, you can pick bright colors. I don't know if that makes a big difference, but you're really just going for a reaction bite with those fish. That's why you're trolling so fast. But get out there, cover some water, and if you're lucky, you'll tie into a giant. Moving on to the walleye bite, things still haven't changed with those either. I'm definitely seeing pushes of fish moving in shallow right now. Most of my fishing for walleyes this last week has been in the evenings, and we've just been targeting them with bobbers and leeches. I would say my best areas have actually been in about 10 to 12 feet of water, and those fish typically only go right at sunset. But for the last hour of the day, 10 to 12 feet of water, wherever you can find large rock with a gravel transition, that seems to be some of my better spots. And it's good for a few fish right at sunset. For guys that are going out during the day, the power corking is always a great option this time of year. There's a variety of places you can do it. I would recommend fishing deep though, whether it's deep gravel bars or the edges of the mud flats. But just troll around until you mark some fish, especially fish that are lifted up off the bottom a little bit. Throw your corks right out behind the boat and try to pick off some aggressive fish. The other thing that works well this time of year and will continue to work well for at least another couple weeks will be the Leadcore bite. And you can do that a couple different ways. Some guys will go to the gravel bars and the mud flats. They'll troll on the edges of the gravel bar, the transitions, or they'll go to the mud flats and fish the edges of the mud flats with the Leadcore and the small crankbaits. But another way that works pretty well, and what I might recommend doing right now, is actually fishing the rock piles. And what I've noticed is a lot of the fish that are on the gravel bars and the mud flats, they tend to be pretty well fed right now. They're eating well, there's a lot of bait in the lake. And I've noticed that the rock piles tend to have a little bit more aggressive fish. So you can do that with the Leadcore or the power corking during the day. But the rock piles, I would say anywhere from about 18 feet of water down to about 24 feet of water. Try to find some rocks that, are a consistent depth that makes it a lot easier for trolling the Leadcore. But troll the lead during the day. It's a great way to pick up aggressive fish. There's definitely a lot of slot fish to be had in the lake, so if you're looking to keep some fish, trolling those little bit shallower rocks than the gravel and the mud has definitely been kicking out more of the keeper size fish for me. And finally, onto the smallmouth. Smallmouth bite's pretty good right now, but it definitely has peak windows of activity. We're definitely in our summer mode still. We haven't hit the fall transition yet. Like I said, we are going to see a weather change come this weekend. Definitely on Saturday, it's going to be a big dip in cooler weather, and I expect that to make things really fire out here. Right now, that's not to say that the smallmouth bite isn't good. It's just it's spurty and it goes in windows. You have these windows of activity where it's just manic feeding. You're catching fish left and right, and then you go through some periods midday where it's just really tough to get bit. But if you stick with it, there's definitely some really good fishing to be had right now. And in a couple more days by this weekend, we're going to have that initial fall cool down, and those fish are going to be taken off throughout the day after that. As far as baits go, what I would recommend is it's kind of a two-pronged approach to targeting the smallies right now. I'd either be using bottom dragging baits or minnow imitating baits. If it's flat calm like it is right now behind me, a spy bait is a great way to catch fish out here. Just cast it out, reel it in slow, don't do any funny business with it, just a slow, steady reel. It's a great way to catch fish when it's flat calm like it is now, even in the bright sunshine. As far as the bottom dragging baits go, they work all the time. Whether it's a tube, a Ned rig, or a little jig worm, they just catch fish day in and day out here under all conditions. So it's always something that you should have at the ready. Just make sure you're dragging them slow on the bottom. A lot of people want to go too fast with it. My recommendation is you can't go too slow dragging the bottom, but you can definitely go too fast. So when in doubt, slow down. And the other minnow type imitating bait is a swim bait, and a swim bait works really well out here. But what I would recommend is instead of springtime where you're doing a lot of casting and simply winding it in, I would get a little more focused with it. Try to pick out specific rocks, try to pick out specific rock spines, and try to make bottom contact with it. Get it to deflect off the boulder, get it to bounce off the rocks when you're coming by them. When you have fish that are just sitting there kind of sedentary during the day, banging a bait by them and getting it to come around the rock is a great way of provoking a reaction out of them. When it comes to the structures for the smallmouth, it's kind of the same old thing right now. Look for big rock, large rock, boulder, that sort of thing. If you can find a stretch of rocks, say on a break line of large rock and boulder, or if you can find large individual boulders or a point or a spine of large boulders, any of those things are going to attract a lot of smallmouth right now, and they're going to continue to attract them throughout the fall. But when you can find that type of structure, key in on that, fish it well, and there's definitely fish to be had on those areas. As far as depth, I wouldn't get too concerned about depth. We're still catching fish shallow water all the way out to deep water. It's really more structure related than it is depth related. But as a rule of thumb out here, once you get past the spawn, anything like in that 10 to 12 foot of water, it's always a good starting point. There's a lot of it out here, and there's a lot of fish in that water. Hopefully this stuff helps you out, and have a great weekend.